a worldview which is increasingly dominated by economic priorities, Foundation for Ecological Security, FES, believes that human society is a part of a larger ecological whole, a larger ecological planet. We are just one of the various living forms. And out of our ways of living, the human society's ways of living, economic priorities are just one set of priorities. We have other goals by which we lead happy lives. With this kind of a worldview, there are three cornerstones on which FES activities rest. First and foremost is ecological restoration. We believe in the biophysical infrastructure as the true infrastructure for rural economies. By that I mean soil, water, moisture, nutrients, biodiversity. This is fundamental for farming to survive, for the resilience of farming and farm economies. The second important aspect is the social infrastructure, which is collective action, the ways in which rural societies interact with one another, with families, and the kind of bonds that they build amongst each other, and rules and regulations which govern their life. These are important platforms on which their lifestyles are determined. We build our actions on the social infrastructure within a village, essentially the collective action within a village. The third dimension is a tilt towards the poor, so that we enable better economic opportunities, but within ecological thresholds. So we have ecological restoration, local governance based on social infrastructure, and economic opportunity for the rural poor as three cornerstones of the organization. We should admit that we were born out of rich experience from a project which was designed again around nature and human beings, which was called Tree Growers Cooperatives Project. We realized from implementing at quite a large scale across India that however simple tree growing might sound, it is deeply laden in the political economy of land, water, organization, capital. And the formats, the structures that we introduce in villages are enabling laws and policies that we actually take to villages could in a way either strengthen their lives or might act in ways which might be divisive, excluding poor or probably reinforcing the status quo of power structures. We found in our experience that cooperatives, though they are wonderful forms of collective action, when you are working with common pooled resources, they could be detrimental or probably incompatible to the rural life. We also realize that trees are just a symbol of ecosystems, that people are basically talking about restoring their water bodies, restoring their pastures, restoring forests, grasses, shrubs and trees, and not necessarily only trees. So we moved away from that into looking at issues concerning ecosystems on the whole, the integrity of ecosystems like hydrological regimes, nutrient regimes, biodiversity, and that's where we saw ecological security, and we set up a foundation for ecological security. Mid-80s were the times when satellite imageries hit developmental planning in India. They were shared with civil society. One of the things that came out starkly from this satellite imageries was the extent of land degradation in the country. It was around the time when Mr. Rajiv Gandhi was elected as the Prime Minister of India. So in one of his, probably the first speech that he gave as the Prime Minister to the nation, he referred to this extent of degraded land available. Unfortunately, those lands were called wasteland, or mistakenly called wasteland. And he talked about an effort or the need for people across India to come together to restore these degraded lands. That's how I think it was a momentous decision taken by Government of India by setting up a Wastelands Development Board with the mandate of restoring 5 million hectares of land every year. We were one of the organizations born out of that. by definition common pool resources, though the abbreviation is, we call it as commons, it's called common pool resources. By definition, these are nature or man-made resource systems where it is difficult or probably costly to exclude potential beneficiaries from benefiting from the use. Broadly, that's the definition of common pool resources. The twin definition is the social arrangements to govern these natural resources, which are called common property regimes, where such common pool resources are governed for collective use, social regulations, rules and rewards and punishments, responsibilities. This is the second set of commons, common property regimes. Together they are called as commons. The extent of dependence of commons, studies in 70s, 90s, 2010 estimate as high as 80-90% of rural India depending on commons for things like firewood, for things fodder, water, sometimes food, medicine, and this is something which is critical for the day-to-day life. The extent of such land, there are a variety of estimates which say from 15 to 30% of India's land mass. So we are talking something like 60 million hectares to 45 million hectares of land, almost the size of Kenya. That much of land could be classified as commons. In several villages which you would visit, you would realize that like they manage common land, even seed is managed as commons within the village. Seed exchanges happen. The second dimension is that we are working towards bringing back the varieties of millets, traditional crops, which were a part of such dryland economies, back into mainstream agriculture. That is the way we have been working. The third dimension which you see is how we have been working with farmers to make seed collection and seed multiplication also a matter of their own domain. We have virtually taken over seed multiplication from government departments, wherein seed is being multiplied at a large scale in certain parts of the country and distributed with the village people. While I spoke about the positive elements of some of the policies, one of the serious drawbacks is compartmentalization. We all know that forests are very much essential for hydrological systems. Forests are managed by a different policy, a different department, which do not connect to agriculture, which do not connect to recharge of water. And then you have water being managed by a department which is totally different. While it might be necessary to manage it different through departments, there has to be a larger overview which governs such resources. We also feel that most of the policies which are required are actually there. There is a serious drawback in its effective translation to the ground. And I think most of the main reason for that is the government assumes that it has to do it, whereas it only has to enable people to do it. If there are enabling provisions in these policies and programs where people automatically claim and do it, it's only for the governments are only necessary to undertake a regulatory function. We are talking about something like 40 million, 50 million hectares. We are spending something like $7 to $8 billion annually on these lands. I think it's high time we wake up and have institutional investments alongside these financial investments. By institutional investments, what I mean is secure tenure, clear access and benefit rules, and devolving it to the local institution like a panchayat or a fourth tier village institution. I think that's what we are working on.